Two guards approached a woman in military uniform, demanding she leave her son's graduation ceremony immediately. "You're not invited here," one sneered, assuming she was just another pretender. But when 12 Navy SEALs entered the gymnasium, everything changed. They were about to discover who Major Diana Fortress Johnson really was. The morning sun cast long shadows across Fort Campbell's main gymnasium as families gathered for the class of 2024 graduation ceremony. Red congratulatory banners hung proudly from the rafters, their golden letters gleaming under the bright overhead lights. The air buzzed with excitement as proud parents, siblings, and loved ones filled the bleacher seats, cameras ready to capture this momentous day. Major Diana Fortress Johnson walked through the main entrance with quiet confidence. At 38, she carried herself with the unmistakable bearing of a seasoned military officer. Her dress blue uniform was immaculate, every crease sharp, every medal positioned perfectly across her chest. The silver oak leaves on her collar caught the light as she moved, and the rows of ribbons told a story of distinguished service that few would ever fully understand. Her blonde hair was styled in regulation fashion, not a strand out of place. The uniform fit her perfectly, tailored to accommodate both military standards and her feminine frame. She'd earned every ribbon, every medal, every symbol of rank through 15 years of dedicated service, including 3 tours overseas and countless sacrifices that had shaped her into the woman she was today. Diana paused just inside the doorway, scanning the crowd for an available seat. Her son Michael was graduating today, her pride and joy following in her footsteps by joining the military. She'd moved heaven and earth to be here, adjusting her deployment schedule and calling in favors to ensure she wouldn't to miss this moment. The gymnasium was nearly full, families chatting excitedly as they waited for the ceremony to begin. Children ran between the rows, while parents saved seats with purses and jackets. The atmosphere was festive, filled with the kind of anticipation that only comes with celebrating achievement. As Diana made her way toward an empty section near the middle of the bleachers, she noticed a few curious glances. Some people smiled respectfully when they noticed her uniform, offering small nods of acknowledgement. Others seemed surprised to see a woman in military dress, their eyes lingering on her medals with a mixture of curiosity and confusion. She chose a seat with a clear view of the stage where the ceremony would take place. From here, she'd be able to see Michael when his name was called, to capture that moment when all her sacrifice and his hard work would culminate in this achievement. Diana settled into her seat, placing her small purse beside her and adjusting her uniform jacket. The ceremony was scheduled to begin in 30 minutes. Diana closed her eyes for a moment, taking in the sounds around her, the excited chatter, the occasional laugh, the rustle of programs being distributed. This was exactly where she belonged, celebrating her son's success alongside other proud families. 20 minutes before the ceremony was scheduled to begin, Diana noticed 2 security guards making their way through the crowd. They wore dark uniforms with official badges, their eyes scanning the assembled families with practiced vigilance. She paid them little attention at first, assuming they were simply ensuring everything ran smoothly for the graduation. The first guard was a heavy-set man in his 50s named Chuck Morrison, whose weathered face suggested years of dealing with various situations. His partner, Tony Ritchie, was younger and more aggressive in his approach, the type who enjoyed flexing whatever authority his position provided. Both men carried themselves with the swagger of people who believed their badges made them important. Chuck nudged Tony as they approached Diana's section. "Look at that," he muttered under his breath, gesturing discreetly toward Diana. "Someone's playing dress-up today." Tony squinted at Diana's uniform, his expression immediately shifting to one of suspicion and disdain. "Are you kidding me? That's obviously fake. Look at all those ribbons. Like anyone would believe a woman earned all that." Diana remained focused on the stage area, mentally rehearsing the moment she'd see Michael walk across to receive his certificate. She'd missed too many of his milestones over the years due to deployments and training exercises. This moment meant everything to her. The 2 guards exchanged knowing looks before making their approach. Chuck cleared his throat loudly as they stopped directly in front of Diana's seat. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, his tone carrying an unmistakable edge of authority mixed with condescension. Diana looked up, meeting his gaze with calm professionalism. Yes? Tony stepped forward, crossing his arms over his chest. We're going to need to see some identification. There have been reports of unauthorized personnel in the area. Reports? Diana's eyebrows raised slightly. She reached into her purse and produced her military ID, handing it to Chuck without hesitation. I'm here for my son's graduation. Chuck examined the ID card, turning it over in his hands as if looking for signs of forgery. Tony leaned in, pointing at various elements of Diana's uniform. These ribbons look suspicious. And this rank? Major? Come on, lady, we weren't born yesterday. Several nearby families had begun to notice the interaction, conversations quieting as people turned to watch what was happening. Diana could feel their eyes on her, some confused, others beginning to whisper among themselves. My identification is legitimate, Diana said calmly, extending her hand for T-Car. He return of her ID. I'm Major Diana Johnson, and I have every right to be here. Tony scoffed, shaking his head dramatically. Right, and I'm General Patton. Look, we don't know where you got this costume, but military impersonation is a federal crime. We're trying to be nice about this. Diana's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but her voice remained steady. I suggest you contact your supervisor. There seems to be some misunderstanding here. Chuck handed back her ID with obvious reluctance. No misunderstanding, ma'am. We know what we're looking at. This is a legitimate military ceremony, not some costume party. Maybe you should consider leaving before this becomes more embarrassing for everyone involved. The circle of attention around them was growing larger, with more families beginning to stare and whisper. The announcement about the ceremony's imminent start seemed to embolden the two guards. Chuck stepped closer to Diana, his voice taking on a more aggressive tone. All right, playtime's over. You've had your fun, but now you need to leave. These families deserve to enjoy this ceremony without distractions. Diana's hands remained clasped calmly behind her back, a posture that anyone with military experience would recognize as parade rest. I'm not causing any distraction. I'm simply sitting here waiting to watch my son graduate. Tony gestured broadly at her uniform. This whole charade is a distraction. Look around. People are staring, whispering, taking pictures. You're turning this into a circus. Indeed, the situation had drawn considerable attention. Families throughout the section were now watching openly, some standing to get a better view. The whispers had grown louder, with people debating among themselves about what was happening. I think she looks legitimate, an elderly man murmured to his wife. Those medals look real to me. His wife shook her head uncertainly. I don't know, Harold. Would they really ask her to leave if she belonged here? A younger woman holding a toddler pulled out her phone, beginning to record. This is crazy. They're harassing a veteran at a military graduation. Chuck noticed the phone and immediately turned toward her. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to put that away. This is a private matter. Private? The woman shot back. You're making a public scene and embarrassing this service member. People should see how you're treating her. Tony's patience was clearly wearing thin. He turned back to Diana with increased aggression. Look, I don't know what game you're playing, but it ends now. Either you leave voluntarily, or we'll have you escorted out. Diana's expression remained unchanged, but something subtle shifted in her posture. The calm demeanor was still there, but underneath it, anyone with military experience could sense the steel that had earned her the nickname Fortress. And exactly who would escort me out? She asked quietly. Chuck puffed out his chest. We would. We have the authority to remove disruptive individuals from this premises. I see. Diana's voice was dangerously calm. And what gives you the authority to remove a United States Army major from a military ceremony? Tony scoffed again. There you go with the major thing again. Lady, give it up. Whatever you bought that costume for, it wasn't worth it. A new voice cut through the tension from several rows back. What's going on here? A man in civilian clothes, but with unmistakable military bearing, approached the group. His grey hair and weathered face suggested long years of service. Chuck immediately adopted a more professional tone. Sir, we're dealing with an individual who's impersonating military personnel. We're trying to resolve this quietly. The newcomer's eyes moved over Diana's uniform, taking in details that the guards had missed or dismissed. His expression grew increasingly serious as he noted the specific ribbons, the expert way the uniform was worn, the small details that couldn't be faked. What's your name, soldier? He asked Diana directly. Major Diana Johnson, sir. United States Army. The man's face went pale as recognition dawned. He stepped closer, his eyes widening as he took in the full scope of Diana's decorations. Among the ribbons on her chest was one that made his breath catch, the Silver Star, one of the military's highest honors for valor in combat. "Dear God," he whispered, then spoke louder. "You're Major Diana Fortress Johnson, the Diana Johnson who saved 37 soldiers in Kandahar." A hush fell over the immediate area as his words carried weight that even civilians could understand. Chuck and Tony exchanged uncertain glances, their confidence beginning to waver for the first time. The man extended his hand formally. "Master Sergeant Rodriguez, retired. Ma'am, it's an honor to meet you. I served with some of the men you brought home that day." Diana shook his hand with a small nod. "Sergeant Rodriguez, how are those men doing?" "Alive, thanks to you." Rodriguez turned toward the gathered crowd, his voice carrying across the section. "Folks, this woman is a genuine American hero. She single-handedly held off enemy fire while evacuating wounded soldiers under impossible conditions." Tony's face had gone pale, but his stubborn pride wouldn't let him back down completely. "Anyone can claim to be a hero. How do we know this isn't all part of the act?" Rodriguez's expression hardened as he turned toward the guards. "Because I was there, son. I served 2 tours with men who owe their lives to Major Johnson's actions that day." He pulled out his phone, quickly scrolling through contacts. "I can call at least a dozen people right now who will verify exactly who she is." Chuck shifted uncomfortably, reality beginning to sink in. "Look, we were just doing our job. We get a lot of people trying to sneak into these events." By questioning a decorated veteran, Rodriguez's voice rose slightly. By publicly humiliating someone who served this country with distinction. More people were gathering now, drawn by the commotion. Several other men and women with obvious military bearing had moved closer, their expressions growing increasingly serious as they overheard the conversation. Diana remained calm throughout the exchange, but spoke directly to the guards. "Gentlemen, I understand mistakes happen, but perhaps this can serve as a learning opportunity about making assumptions." Tony's defensive posture cracked slightly. We were told to watch for people impersonating military personnel. It happens more than you'd think." "It does happen," Diana agreed. "But there are ways to verify credentials without public humiliation. Military personnel carry specific identification, and there are proper channels for authentication." Rodriguez pulled up something on his phone and showed it to several bystanders. "This is a news article from 2019 about Major Johnson's actions in Afghanistan. There are photos, official citations, everything." The crowd around them had grown to include at least 40 people, many now pulling out their own phones to look up information about Diana. The whispers had changed entirely in tone, no longer skeptical, but amazed and ashamed of what they had witnessed. Chuck looked sick. "Ma'am, we didn't know. We made a mistake." "A big mistake," added a voice from the crowd. A woman in her 60s stepped forward, showing her phone screen. "I just looked her up. Major Johnson didn't just save those soldiers. She's received multiple commendations for service. She's a registered speaker for veterans organizations." Tony's bravado had completely evaporated. "We're sorry. We really thought... You thought a woman couldn't have earned these honors," Diana said quietly. "That's the real issue here, isn't it?" The uncomfortable silence that followed was broken by the sound of the gymnasium's main doors opening with purpose. 12 men entered the gymnasium in perfect formation, their presence immediately commanding the attention of everyone in the building. They wore dress blue uniforms that marked them as Navy SEALs, their bearing unmistakably elite. The crowd instinctively parted as they moved with synchronized precision down the main aisle. Leading the group was Commander Marcus Steele Thompson, a man whose reputation preceded him throughout the special operations community. His weathered face and intense eyes spoke of countless missions and unshakable dedication to his brothers and sisters in arms. The formation came to a halt directly in front of the section where Diana stood, still surrounded by the crowd that had gathered during the confrontation. Commander Thompson stepped forward, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being heard and obeyed. "Major Diana Fortress Johnson," he called out formally, his voice echoing through the suddenly silent gymnasium. Diana straightened to attention, recognizing both the voice and the protocol. Commander Thompson. Ma'am, we came as soon as we heard you might be here. Thompson's eyes swept over the two security guards who had gone completely pale. We wanted to pay our respects to one of the finest officers we've ever had the privilege to serve alongside. Chuck's voice came out as barely a whisper. Navy SEALs. Commander Thompson turned his attention to the guards, his expression cold as winter steel. That's correct. We're here to honor Major Johnson, who not only saved 37 American soldiers, but also provided critical intelligence that prevented an attack on our forward operating base. Tony looked like he might be sick. We didn't know. We thought. You thought you'd humiliate a decorated veteran at her son's graduation. Another SEAL stepped forward. Lieutenant Commander Jake Ha. Mima Rodriguez, you thought you'd question the integrity of someone who's bled for this country. Master Sergeant Rodriguez, who had first recognized Diana, stepped toward the SEALs. These men were demanding she leave, sir. They claimed she was impersonating military personnel. Commander Thompson's jaw tightened visibly. Is that so? He looked directly at Chuck and Tony. Gentlemen, you just attempted to remove one of the most decorated female veterans in recent military history from her own son's graduation ceremony. The crowd around them had swelled to include most of the families in that section of the gymnasium. Phones were recording from multiple angles, capturing every word of the exchange. Diana stepped forward slightly. Commander, while I appreciate your support, these men were attempting to do their job as they understood it. With respect, Major, Thompson replied. Their job doesn't include publicly questioning the legitimacy of a Silver Star recipient based on gender bias. Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez pulled out a tablet, scrolling to an official military database. Major Johnson's service record, if anyone needs verification. 3 combat tours, 2 Bronze Stars, 1 Silver Star, Purple Heart, and citations for extraordinary service that most of us could only dream of achieving. He held the screen up for the surrounding crowd to see. The official military photos, commendations, and service record were all clearly visible, leaving no room for doubt or debate. Chuck finally found his voice, though it shook noticeably. Major Johnson, we owe you a sincere apology. We made terrible assumptions. Tony nodded frantically. We were completely wrong. There's no excuse for how we treated you. Commander Thompson's expression didn't soften. Apologies are a start, but actions have consequences. This incident will be reported to your supervisors and to base command. The public address system crackled again, announcing that the graduation ceremony would begin in 3 minutes. Diana glanced toward the stage, her focus returning to why. She was there. Gentlemen, she said to all assembled, my son is about to graduate. That's what matters most to me right now. As word of the incident spread through the gymnasium, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. Families who had been chatting excitedly about the upcoming ceremony were now focused on the remarkable scene unfolding before them. The presence of 12 Navy SEALs had transformed what should have been a routine graduation into something extraordinary. Commander Thompson gestured to his team, and they formed a respectful semicircle around Diana's seating area. Their presence sent a clear message to everyone in the building. This woman was not just respected, but revered among the military's most elite units. Chuck Morrison stood frozen, his earlier confidence completely shattered. 25 years of private security work, and he'd never made a mistake this catastrophic. His hands trembled slightly as he realized the full magnitude of what had just transpired. Sir, Chuck addressed Commander Thompson with a voice barely above a whisper, is there anything we can do to make this right? Thompson's response was measured but firm. You can ensure this never happens to another veteran. You can learn to recognize genuine service when you see it. And you can understand that a uniform isn't a costume. It's a symbol of sacrifice. Tony Ritchie had gone completely silent, his face ashen as he stared at Diana's ribbons with new understanding. Each medal represented something he couldn't comprehend. Courage under fire, sacrifice for others, a level of service that transcended civilian understanding. Master Sergeant Rodriguez approached the 2 guards with slightly more compassion than the SEALs had shown. Gentlemen, I understand the mistake, but here's what you need to know. Major Johnson didn't just serve, she redefined what service means. Those soldiers she Aved, they have children now, families, futures, all because she refused to leave anyone behind. The crowd around them had grown to include nearly half the gymnasium's attendees. Parents had moved from their original seats to witness what was happening, understanding instinctively that they were observing something significant. A woman in her 40s stepped forward from the crowd. "Major Johnson, my brother served in Afghanistan. He wrote home about you, about the female officer who saved his unit. I never thought I'd have the chance to thank you personally." Diana smiled warmly. "Your brother served with honor. No thanks necessary." The woman's eyes filled with tears. "There are necessary thanks. He came home because of what you did. He walked me down the aisle at my wedding because of your courage." Similar testimonials began emerging from the crowd. It became clear that Diana's reputation extended far beyond official military channels. She was known among military families as a genuine hero whose actions had rippled through countless lives. Chuck finally approached Diana directly, his voice heavy with remorse. "Ma'am, I have a nephew in the army. If someone treated him the way we treated you..." He couldn't finish the sentence. Diana's response was gracious but pointed. "The important thing is learning from this experience. Veterans come in all forms, different ages, genders, backgrounds, but we all share certain common bonds." The ceremony announcement came again, this time stating that graduation would begin in 60 seconds. Diana looked toward the stage where soon she would see Michael receive his certificate. Commander Thompson made a decision. "Ma'am, would you permit us to escort you to the front row? You deserve the best seat in the house." Diana graciously accepted Commander Thompson's offer, and the SEALs formed an honor guard as they escorted her to a reserved section near the front of the gymnasium. The entire crowd watched in respectful silence as this procession made its way down the center aisle, understanding they were witnessing something special. The ceremony began with the traditional presentation of colors, but all eyes remained on Diana and her SEAL escort. When the base commander took the podium to address the gathering, he paused mid-speech, having been quietly informed of the situation. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "we have a special honor today. Major Diana Fortress Johnson is here to celebrate her son's graduation. Major Johnson is a Silver Star recipient whose heroic actions in Afghanistan saved 37 American lives. We're privileged to have her with us." The entire gymnasium erupted in spontaneous applause that lasted nearly 2 full minutes. Diana stood and acknowledged the recognition with a slight nod, then resumed her seat, her focus returning to the stage where her son would soon appear. Chuck and Tony had retreated to a corner of the gymnasium, both men visibly shaken by the experience. Their supervisor, having been contacted by base command, arrived shortly after the ceremony began. The conversation was brief but clearly serious, with both guards nodding repeatedly as they received what was obviously a severe reprimand. As names were called and graduates crossed the stage, the atmosphere remained electric. When Michael Johnson was announced, Diana rose to her feet, her face beaming with pride as her son crossed the stage in his dress uniform. The crowd around her applauded extra enthusiastically, sharing in her moment of maternal joy. Commander Thompson leaned over to Diana during the applause. "He looks just like his mother, strong, confident, ready to serve." "He's better than his mother," Diana replied with genuine pride. "He's going into special forces, following his own path." After the ceremony concluded, the scene around Diana was remarkable. Military families lined up to thank her personally, many sharing stories of relatives whose lives had been touched by her service. Young graduates approached to ask for photos, inspired by meeting a living example of what dedicated service could achieve. Chuck Morrison finally worked up the courage to approach Diana one final time. His supervisor stood behind him, ensuring the conversation would happen. "Major Johnson," Chuck began, his voice steadier than before, but filled with genuine remorse. "I want you to know that I'm going to use this experience to train our entire security team. We clearly need education about recognizing and respecting veteran status." Diana nodded approvingly. "That would be valuable training. Veterans don't always look like what people expect. We're diverse in every way, except our commitment to service." Tony stepped forward as well. "Ma'am, I have no excuse for my behavior. I let assumptions override respect. and that's unacceptable. The fact that you recognize that puts you ahead of many people, Diana replied. Growth comes from acknowledging mistakes and choosing to do better. As the gymnasium began to empty, Diana was surrounded by her son Michael and his fellow graduates, all eager to meet the hero they'd heard about during their training. The contrast with the day's earlier events was stark. Respect had replaced suspicion. Honor had replaced humiliation. 3 weeks after the graduation ceremony, the incident had transformed from a local embarrassment into a national teaching moment. Video footage captured by attendees had been viewed millions of times online, sparking conversations about veteran recognition and the dangers of making assumptions based on appearance. Chuck Morrison had indeed followed through on his promise. The security company implemented comprehensive training about military protocols and veteran identification. Chuck himself became the primary instructor, using his own experience as a cautionary tale about the importance of respect and proper verification procedures. Tony Ritchie had taken a different path. He'd enrolled in classes to better understand military, culture, and veteran issues. The shame of his behavior had motivated genuine change, and he'd begun volunteering with veteran support organizations to better comprehend the sacrifice and service he'd so callously dismissed. Diana received hundreds of letters from military families sharing their own stories of discrimination and misunderstanding. Many thanked her for handling the situation with such dignity, noting that her response had provided a model for how to address prejudice without stooping to the level of those who perpetuate it. Commander Thompson and his SEAL team had become unexpected advocates for veteran recognition programs. They had spoken at multiple events about the importance of looking beyond stereotypes to recognize genuine service, regardless of how it might be packaged. Michael Johnson had completed his initial training and was preparing for Special Forces selection. The incident at his graduation had taught him valuable lessons about leadership, dignity under pressure, and the importance of standing up for what's right, lessons his mother had been teaching him his entire life. The base commander had implemented new protocols for civilian security personnel working military events. All contractors now received mandatory training about military customs, courtesies, and the proper way to verify credentials without causing public humiliation. Diana herself had been invited to speak at veteran events across the country, sharing her experience as an example of how to respond to discrimination with grace while still standing firm in defense of dignity and respect. The lesson resonated far beyond military circles. Corporate training programs began using the incident as a case study in unconscious bias and the importance of verification over assumption. Educational institutions incorporated it into diversity and inclusion curricula. Most importantly, the incident had sparked conversations in countless American homes about what veterans look like, what service means, and how society should treat those who have sacrificed for their country. Diana's response to that day, calm, dignified, educational rather than vengeful, had demonstrated that true strength often lies not in retaliation, but in using difficult moments to create positive change. Her example reminded everyone that heroes don't always announce themselves, but they can always be found among us, often in the most unexpected forms.